I nursed my father-in-law through 2 surgeries. When he passed, his will left me nothing. Instead, he thanked me by name for doing my duty as a servant. My husband called it an old man's mistake. I called it my wake-up call. I was 30 when I met Alan. I was working night shifts at UPMC Mercy in Pittsburgh, mostly cardiac care. He came in one night to visit his aunt after her stroke. We got to talking near the vending machines. He was quiet, polite, wore glasses that made him look serious, almost bookish. At that point in my life, I was tired of men who talked big and delivered nothing. Alan was a change of pace. He wasn't passionate, but he was reliable. He texted when he said he would. He showed up on time. He was respectful. I thought that's what mattered. I didn't need fireworks, I needed stability. Someone to build a life with. And in the beginning, that's what I thought I had. We got married 2 years later. Small wedding, courthouse, followed by dinner at his father's house. That was the first time I really met Raymond, his dad. He was stiff, formal, barely looked at me. When I tried to make conversation, he said, "So you're in medicine. At least you're not one of those yoga therapists." I laughed, awkwardly. Alan didn't say a word. Raymond wasn't cruel, exactly. Just cold. He had that engineer's brain, calculating, unsentimental. After his wife died 10 years earlier, he never dated, never traveled, never downsized. Lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch in MT Lebanon like he was waiting for the clock to run out. He clipped coupons but had over $1 million in investments. Old school frugal. I tried, for years, to earn his warmth. Sunday dinners, birthday cards, calling him just to check in. It was always the same. A grunt, a nod, maybe a rare thanks. Alan said, "That's just how he is." I accepted it. Then came the first health scare. Raymond collapsed at home. Alan was traveling for work. The neighbor found him disoriented, vomiting blood. It was pancreatitis, serious enough to need surgery and a long hospital stay. Alan panicked. I took charge. I arranged the doctors, made sure his meds were right, translated the medical lingo so Alan could understand what was happening. But it didn't stop there. Raymond needed help after he was discharged. And without even discussing it, Alan assumed I'd be the one. "You're the nurse. You know what you're doing." So I took a week off work, brought him to our home, and played caregiver. I bathed his surgical site. I dealt with his mood swings. I cleaned up after his accidents, without a single complaint. He never once said thank you. The second time came a year later. Raymond fell in his bathroom and fractured his hip. Again, Alan looked to me. "Rehab was too depressing," he said. "Dad doesn't want to go to one of those places." So we converted our guest room into a hospital room. I rearranged my work schedule. For 6 full weeks, I did everything: bathing, feeding, catheter care, physical therapy, meds. It aged me. I was barely sleeping. My back ached. I was snapping at patients at work because I was so drained. But I kept telling myself, this is what families do. Raymond got better. Not friendlier. Not warmer. Just physically stronger. He moved back into his own home. I started to get back to normal. Alan never once sat me down to ask how I was coping. Never offered to take over any part of Raymond's care. He'd say, "You're better at it," and go back to his laptop. Then came the fall that ended everything. Quiet morning. I checked in on Raymond, like I always did. He'd been staying with us again because his balance had been declining. He was in his bed, peaceful, mouth slightly open, cold to the touch. Just like that, he was gone. Alan sobbed. I just stood there, empty. I had sacrificed hundreds of hours, probably years of my life, caring for this man. And I felt nothing. Not grief. Just relief. Guilt about the relief, but still relief. We held a private funeral. Raymond had been clear: no big service, no eulogies, no flowers. I honored his wishes to the letter. I arranged the cremation, called the few friends he had left, made sure everything went smoothly. Then came the will reading. The lawyer, a pale guy in his 50s named Sherman, sat across from us in a small office downtown. It was quiet. Clinical. I remember the air conditioner made a faint clicking sound every few seconds. Raymond left his entire estate to Alan. The house. The money. The car. The investments. Everything. Over $1.2 million in assets. And then Sherman cleared his throat and said, "There's a personal note for Mrs. Porter." He pulled out a small slip of paper and read it aloud. "To my daughter-in-law, Sandra, who did her duty well, as any good servant would, I leave my respect." There was a silence that hit me like a brick. My ears rang. I looked at Sherman, then at Alan. Waiting. Alan rubbed the back of his neck and said, "That's just Dad's way of speaking. He didn't mean anything by it. Didn't mean anything by it." After years of wiping his father's ass, staying up through the night to change his dressings, skipping holidays and friends' weddings to care for that man, and I was a servant? I didn't say anything. I nodded slowly, took a breath, and walked out of that office. I went home, took a long shower, and sat at the kitchen table for hours.
No te ve.
No phone. Just silence. Thinking. That night, Alan asked what was wrong. I told him nothing. I smiled and made him dinner like usual. Because I knew something now that I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. They had never seen me as a person. Just a convenience. A live-in nurse. A reliable pair of hands. But that was over now. I started keeping a journal. A log of everything I had sacrificed. I started reading up on inheritance law. I quietly copied financial documents. I downloaded old emails, printed messages, checked phone records. I found out more than I expected. This wasn't just about Raymond anymore. This was about my marriage. About how many quiet, invisible ways I had been pushed into a corner. This wasn't grief. It was a wake-up call. And I was wide awake now. After that day at the lawyer's office, something in me broke. But not in a fragile way, in a clear way. Like when glass shatters and you finally see how thin it really was. Alan went back to work like nothing happened. He even joked a week later, "At least Dad didn't leave it all to a cat rescue." I laughed too, but I didn't mean it. I stopped asking him questions. I stopped sharing how I felt. And I started watching. At first, it was little things. Alan changed his phone password. He started staying late at work more often. I asked once, just once, "Everything okay at work?" He said, "Yeah, just slammed with the estate stuff." But that didn't explain the cologne I found in his glove compartment. A brand I didn't recognize. He'd never worn cologne our whole marriage. I didn't accuse him. I just logged it in my journal, with the date and time. I also found out he'd already met with a realtor, alone, to start the conversation about selling his father's house. I saw the email chain because he left it open on his tablet one night. The agent wrote, "Excited to list the property. Great bones. Should pull in offers over $600,000. I had cooked meals in that house. I had cleaned his father's blood off those bathroom tiles. And he was planning the sale without even mentioning it to me. So I started digging deeper. I pulled our tax returns from the last 5 years. That's when I realized Alan had a separate brokerage account, one I didn't know about. It had over $80,000 in it, all in his name. I asked about it calmly. He blinked and said, "That's just some investments I made from a bonus years ago." I didn't think it mattered. We had spent years budgeting for groceries. I'd cut coupons, said no to vacations. And he had $80,000 socked away, silently. I didn't confront him.
Not yet.
I just smiled and nodded like always. Let him think I was still the quiet, reliable wife. I started recording our conversations. I saved every receipt, every transfer he made from Raymond's accounts. I even visited the elder law attorney who had written Raymond's will. I told him, casually, that I was considering filing a claim. Not because I wanted money, but because I was curious about how undue influence cases worked. He looked uncomfortable. Said, Raymond was very firm. He didn't like over-emotional women. I didn't flinch. I kept digging. And then one night, it all cracked open. Alan left his phone unlocked on the bathroom sink. I wasn't even trying to snoop. I swear to God, I wasn't. But the screen lit up when I picked up my towel. It was a message from someone named R. Miss you. I keep thinking about your hands. That night. You're back. I froze. I scrolled. My throat went dry. They had been texting for over a year.
She worked at his office.
She was 28. He had sent her money, paid off her student loans, bought her an iPad, all while telling me we couldn't afford a new washing machine. I put the phone down. I didn't scream.
I didn't cry.
I walked out of the bathroom, looked at him sitting on the couch, and asked him if he wanted anything from the store. He looked up from the TV and said, "Can you grab more coffee?" That was the moment. Right there. The moment I stopped being his wife, even if he didn't know it yet. From that day forward, I was building something. Not just a case. A plan. I wasn't going to confront him yet. No, I wanted to make sure when I did, it would cost him. Financially. Emotionally.
Publicly.
He had taken my loyalty and used it like toilet paper. Let his father insult me in death. Let me be the unpaid caretaker. Let me sacrifice my body and my time while he squirreled away money and got handsy with a girl half my age. But he forgot something important. I had nothing left to lose. And people like me were the ones you should be afraid of. I kept playing the role. Smiling.
Cooking.
Listening to Alan complain about work while he was secretly texting Rachel, or R, as he saved her in his phone. She worked in HR at his company. I looked her up on LinkedIn. Her profile said things like, empowering women through connection and trust. That part made me laugh out loud. I kept documenting everything. I had over 300 screenshots, recordings of him lying, bank statements showing transfers to her. I even managed to access his cloud backup and found photos. Some were what you'd expect. Others? Let's just say I saw parts of Rachel I never wanted to see. But the twist came when I noticed something weird in one of the bank transfers. It wasn't just money going to her. He'd also wired $5,000 to a name I didn't recognize, Daryl K. Gant. I looked him up. He ran a small LLC out of Ohio. Some kind of consulting company. No website. Just a P.O. box and a disconnected phone number. I asked Alan about it casually. Hey, who's Daryl Gant? He looked up from his laptop, startled. What? You had a transfer labeled Gant Consulting last month. Just curious. He shrugged. It was for some crypto thing. I lost money on it. Not a big deal. That wasn't true. The transfer had gone into Daryl's account, and 3 days later, a $12,000 deposit hit Rachel's checking account from the same LLC. I had the proof. I printed the routing numbers and everything. So now I knew he was hiding how much money he was giving her, using shady routes, maybe even laundering it through a shell company. But here's where it got worse. That house he inherited from Raymond, the one he was planning to sell, he'd already signed a lease-to-own agreement with Rachel. I found the contract folded in a drawer in his office. It wasn't even hidden well. She was already living there, part-time. I confirmed it by driving by one night. Her car was in the driveway. The lights were on. And a porch swing. My porch swing that I had installed for Raymond 2 years earlier was gone, replaced with one of those ugly boho rope hammocks. I sat in my car and stared at that house for over an hour. Not crying. Just feeling my heartbeat in my teeth. That home was supposed to be ours to sell. Ours to decide about. He hadn't said a word. Not once. He was giving it to her bit by bit. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being erased. I started wondering, was this always the plan? Because looking back now, certain things made more sense. Like why Raymond suddenly started calling me reliable, but never let me sign any of the healthcare paperwork. Why Alan insisted we never combine our finances legally. Why he always told me, don't worry about that stuff, I've got it handled. I used to think he was just trying to take pressure off me. Now I realized, he'd been building his exit plan for years. And I had walked right into it. But I wasn't going to run. Because while he was handing over real estate and transferring money under the table, I was doing something else. I had already found the one thing he didn't protect well enough. His company's ethics policy. Rachel was in HR. He was a senior manager. Their affair wasn't just unethical, it was a direct violation of the company's no fraternization clause. I had screenshots of him confirming they'd had sex at a conference. I had messages where she talked about covering for him on time cards. I even had a calendar invite he sent her with a hotel address in the subject line. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger.
Not yet.
Because I still didn't know how far this went. Then one day, while going through the boxes from Raymond's house, things Alan hadn't touched, I found an envelope. Inside were copies of Raymond's original will, and it looked nothing like the one the lawyer had read to us. In this one, dated 3 years earlier, Raymond had left a portion of his estate, specifically $250,000 to me, in cash. For her service and dedication during illness, it read. And Alan's share was less. The new will, the one I sat through in that stuffy office, had cut me out completely. So now the question wasn't, did Alan cheat? It was, did he convince his dying father to rewrite the will behind my back? Or worse, did he forge it? And that changed everything. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about fraud. And if I could prove it, he wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose everything. I spent 3 weeks doing nothing out of the ordinary, at least from Alan's point of view. Same dinners. Same quiet small talk. But every night after he went to sleep, I worked on my file. I had a binder labeled House Repairs in the living room closet. That's where I kept everything. Passwords, bank statements, emails, texts, time-stamped photos. All organized. All dated. I even printed the original will I found in the box of Raymond's things, along with a handwritten letter from Raymond that was tucked between 2 tax folders. It was short. Just 3 lines. If Alan talks me into changing this again, I want it on record, I don't trust him with money. He's reckless, and I know it. That letter wasn't in Alan's version of the will. When I had everything I needed, I made 3 copies of the file. One I kept in a fireproof box under the sink. One I put in a safety deposit box. The third I mailed to myself. Certified. Unopened. Legal timestamp. Then I made 2 appointments. The first was with a probate attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s named Layla Hensley. I laid everything out on her table and told her the truth. I'm not out for money, I said, but I know that will was tampered with. And if you find proof, I want him exposed. She took one look at Raymond's original will, raised an eyebrow, and said, I'll handle it. The second meeting was with Alan's HR department, anonymously at first. I used a throwaway email. I attached the screenshots, the calendar invites, the wire transfers, and a copy of the company's own policy that clearly stated senior managers could not have sexual or financial involvement with HR personnel. 3 days later, Alan came home early from work.
Pale.
Eyes glassy. I got suspended, he said, almost dazed. Pending investigation. I nodded and kept slicing cucumbers for the salad. They're saying someone sent in some bullshit about me and Rachel. It's a misunderstanding. They saw the hotel receipt, didn't they? He froze. How did you know? I looked him in the eye. I sent it. He stared at me like I'd punched him. You did this? What the hell is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I said, putting the knife down. You cheated. You funneled money to your mistress. You tried to hide a house from me. And you erased me from your father's will.
He didn't deny it.
He just sat down at the kitchen table and whispered, You were never supposed to find out. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. I always knew who you were. I just didn't want to believe it. What came next happened fast. The law firm handling Raymond's estate got hit with a formal complaint. The state bar opened a review. Turns out Alan had pressured his father into rewriting the will 3 months before his second surgery. He claimed Raymond was forgetful and wanted to make things simpler. But with the original will, the letter, and medical records showing Raymond was heavily medicated at the time, the court didn't buy it. The judge invalidated the newer will. My share of the estate was reinstated, $250,000. I gave $50,000 to a local hospice program and kept the rest in a trust for myself. Alan's employer fired him quietly.
No shot.
No big scene. but his reputation was shot. He lost his 401k match, his severance, and most of his professional connections. Rachel was let go too. They moved into the house he'd tried to gift her. But it backfired. Because now, the IRS was auditing the transfers. Her name was on documents. And the LLC he used to funnel money?
Flieg ein Number.
He'd get hit with back taxes, penalties, and likely a fraud charge. I served him with divorce papers the same week his termination letter arrived. He tried to apologize.
Tried to cry.
Told me he never meant to hurt me. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You didn't just hurt me.
You used me.
And now you're paying for it." He fought the divorce for 6 months. Claimed mental duress. Said I was vindictive.
But the court didn't buy that either.
I walked away with half the joint assets, my inheritance, and clean hands. He walked away with debt, shame, and a mistress who no longer smiled at him the same way. I sold our house. Bought myself a small condo in Shadyside with lots of natural light and a reading nook. I went back to school part-time geriatric case management. I figured if I was going to care for people, I'd do it on my terms. Sometimes people ask me if I miss him. I don't. I miss who I thought he was. But now I know better. Revenge didn't come with fire or rage. It came with calm, with planning, with truth. Because the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's showing them you're not the fool they thought you were. And never will be again.